T.Y. Hilton's sons, maybe, coming to Lucas Oil Stadium on Sunday, considering he is the daddy of the Houston Texans. I don't know if that makes sense, but what the hell, man. First snow of the year, so I'd just say whatever comes to mind. Kevin Bowen, Chris Presley, back. Another edition of Kevin's Corner. Wednesday, December 16th. Kudos to the NFL for pulling this off up to this point. Unbelievable job. There were skeptics out there. I was optimistic. And thankfully, that has come to fruition. What's up, man?
Not a lot. Like you said, first snowfall here in Indianapolis. We have some listeners across the country and internationally, as we speak about every week. So those of you in the southern hemisphere, props to you for having some nice weather right now.
Yeah, they asked Philip Rivers about that today. Have you ever woken up to snow? And I was like, oh, that's an interesting question. He's like, not intentionally, yes, on vacation sometimes you're, skiing or doing whatever. So dropping off Rosie at daycare this morning, boy, you are reminded quickly how no one remembers how to drive in snow, driving down here to the studio. A little bit better as the day went along, but Colts indoors for practice. So this podcast coming a little bit earlier to you. Don't have the official injury report out yet. Frank Reich mentioned Xavier Rhodes, Darius Leonard back to practice. I was a little bit surprised. I thought maybe they'd even get Wednesday off, but good news on that front. Again, we talked to you on Monday about didn't think it was anything major by any means, but thought those guys might miss a day. Sounds like good news on Anthony Costanzo making it out of the game on Sunday. And then I've probably never seen Frank as excited as he was today talking about an injury, then mentioning Rigoberto Sanchez back to practice. It's just an awesome story since the initial news. When you heard the initial news, 2 weeks ago now, which again is just crazy to say 2 weeks ago when he's back to practice, of having to have surgery to remove that cancerous tumor, and now here he is with the chance to play on Sunday. So unbelievable. We'll see how that plays out. They still have Ryan Allen protected on the practice squad. They cannot call him up again. They have to, permanently, put him onto the 53-man roster if he wants to punt or if they decide that he needs to punt again. So we'll see how that plays out. But, Colts Texans, here we are. Rematch in 14 days. Kind of crazy.
It is. It's always interesting to see how teams that quickly, can game plan for one another. Really disappointing if you're a Texans fan, the way that they played against the Bears.
Boy. Jesus, yeah.
And as a Colts fan, you're kind of like, okay, you know what? Are they giving up on the season? People in the comment sections make a good point. And this is something that doesn't fall on deaf ears with us. You can never overlook a conference opponent.
Well, and you can never overlook a quarterback with the talent of Deshaun Watson.
Right.
I think the line is 7, I believe, last I saw. I think most 4-9 football teams, you'd probably bump that to 10, especially if you look at the injury situation and what has changed from the first meeting on December 6th to what it'll be Sunday. I mean, seemingly, or December 9th, I think it was, seemingly it was a totally different injury situation for the Colts then. No Costanzo, no Okereke, no Willis. And obviously the Texans, in general, have lost a lot of wideouts, but now they've lost 2 defenders since that first game. Justin Reed, their safety, who plays virtually every snap, did against the Colts a few weeks ago. He's on IR, and so is Brandon Dunn, one of the big guys in the middle of that defense as well. So, yeah, it's a pretty depleted Texans team. Watson still gives them fleeting hope, but outside of him, man, and J.J. Watt, I'm not sure if they got a lot of NFL talent on that roster.
Right. And you talk about Watson, I saw him, I think, Pro Football Focus, they still have him ranked as 3rd best overall in grades this year.
Really? That's high.
Yeah.
I mean, I know he's been good, but yeah, wow, that's high praise. I selfishly, I want entertainment, so I'd like to see, this not be 42-3, and but I have a feeling this game could get to some of the Minnesota Jet games you had back in September.
Right.
Of, the Colts have, for the most part, I don't think they've had multi-score leads, for more than about really a quarter or so here in this current, winning 6 of 8 or however long it is. It's kind of been a back and forth to a degree, or, even an opposing team has had the lead. But I have a feeling if you get a couple score lead on this Texans team, it could look like what Chicago did to them last week.
Right. And on the Colts side of things, talking about the quarterback play, Kevin, last podcast was the first time we really touched on Rivers. Obviously, we've talked about the quarterback room and some plays that he's made this year, but you wrote a pretty interesting article on 1075thefan.com this week talking about the numbers, comparing last year to this year, and just diving a little bit more into the play that we've seen from Phillip Rivers at this point.
Yeah, we haven't really singled him out on a podcast in a while, and so I did want to mention that. And, inevitably when you get to week 15 of the season, you start to think about a little bit of the future, and certainly at that position, and given his age, he turned 39 last week, all of that comes up. But I thought he deserved, an article. I talked about that kind of on Monday, my thought process coming out of games. And I knew he had been an upgrade. I knew he had been a significant upgrade. But when you really look at the numbers, Chris, it's pretty darn incredible how much of an upgrade he's been for this football team at the quarterback position. Frank Reich was adamant, mid-January, early January last year, as soon as the season ended and he had that final presser, that the passing offense was an extreme disappointment. And that pissed off as much as you can piss off a former preacher who I've never heard cuss in my life. He was fed up with it. And the efficiency and the chunk plays were the two areas that Frank really, really drove home. And basically the stats, and you guys have heard me talk about this before, it comes down to completion percentage and yards per attempt. Yeah, you can look specifically at chunk plays, and, there's 20-yard is kind of the cutoff for what is considered a chunk play in the pass game. And that tells you a lot. But I think yards per attempt is a little bit more indicative of your ability to just consistently create a decent amount of big plays. And they are, completion percentage-wise, which to me is more of the efficiency, they are 9 percentage points better than they were last year, 59 to 68. That is massive. And then yards per attempt has jumped, I think, nearly a full yard or maybe even over a yard.
Just a little over a yard, yeah.
That's huge as well. You're talking, again, 40 passes a game or something like that. I mean, that's 4 first downs. Obviously, from a completion percentage standpoint, you're keeping drives alive at a much, much higher rate, things like that. So those stood out to me, Chris, but I would say the stat that maybe jumped out to me the most, and again, this is an article form if you haven't seen it already on 1075thefan.com. Everybody's big worry with Rivers was, I should say, back in the spring, 20 interceptions that he had last year with the Chargers. And he's a turnover machine. And in the fourth quarter, he's going to throw a bunch of picks and this and that. And that was a valid, question, concern. And if you look at it this year, he's actually turning the ball over far less than Jacoby Brissett did or / Brian Hoyer did for a game last year. And honestly, that was the great strength of the quarterback position last year that kept you in games. It was, you're not turning the ball over. You aren't giving your opponent short fields. The interception rate is the exact same as we sit here with 3 games to go between last year and this year. But it's the fumbles. Rivers has fumbled once and didn't give it away. And I think quarterbacks last year for the Colts fumbled 11 or 12 times, or I don't know, maybe it's even more than that, and they lost about a half dozen of them. So that, I think, is what stands out to me, Chris, is efficiency, yes. Chunk plays, yes. We felt like that couldn't not get better, to insert my double negative. How was that going to be any worse? But yet you're also protecting it a lot better. And that's why this passing offense has just taken a huge jump. I asked Frank on Monday what kind of stands out to you about Rivers specifically this season, and he used 2 words. It was accuracy and anticipation. And I obviously couldn't agree more with that. Anticipation is something I think we've talked about a whole lot. It's the mental processing. Rivers' ability to count up defenders so quickly and know where they should be is a trait that you just can't teach. And he brings that to the table. Reich mentioned specifically the deep ball to Hilton on Sunday. He threw that ball pretty early. He knew pretty early where it was going. I can't tell you how often, Chris, I watch the All-22 after games and how many times Rivers throws guys open or throws it when these guys aren't even really looking.
Mm-hmm.
Like timing and knowing that the ball has to go here and I've got to get it there. And I know that, my arm isn't Jacob Eason's arm. And so I've got to do things maybe a tad bit early. And I just think it comes down to the whole chess match stuff that we talked about back in the spring of the Colts feel like this move will help them out chess match opposing teams.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the case. I think no crowd noise helps a little bit as well. I think that's helped with the pass protection department and just making sure you're getting into the right play. So I think the Colts have benefited a little bit in that. But yeah, man, this has been a definite upgrade. And his memory is just it's wild. I mean, this might be stupid to some people, but I've found it kind of fun today, or at least like, whoa. I asked him, how many times in your career have you played a team this close back to back? You never see,
you're right.
2 games in 3 weeks against the same opponent. And he couldn't think of a time. And again, as he is, and obviously Phillip Rivers probably gets told by the Colts PR staff, like, hey, expect these 3 or 4 topics, to be asked, blah, blah, blah. I don't think they were like sitting down and prepping for a half hour on, you might get asked about playing a team 2 times in 3 weeks. Let's answer that in a proper way. Like, no, like who cares? Like, I mean, really, it's a pretty useless question by me. I'll fully admit it. I wanted to ask him about, playing after 2020, and it got asked earlier in the Zoom call, so I just kind of threw something together. But he had recall in his mind to say, I think the Jets did it with the Bengals, and then I also think the Cardinals. And I'm like, again, there's no way anyone else like really picked up on this that much, but I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? And so then I'm like, all right, I got to look this up now. Sure enough, 2009 season, Jets and Bengals play in Week 17. They turn around and play in the first round of the wild card.
Yep, I remember that.
Now, the Chargers had the bye that season, and they played, I think, whoever won that game. I forget who won, probably the Jets. Bengals don't win games because Marvin Lewis doesn't want a playoff game. But I'm like, okay, I kind of get that. But then he also remembers this Cardinals game where they turned around, and I think it was Green Bay. They played Green Bay Week 7. That's not even in your own conference. Like, how are you paying attention to that? Like, and basically what I'm getting at is the guy has just got an insane memory, and it's not just a memory. He also is able to process stuff on the football field to where I firmly believe, and I've said this before, I don't think he's panicking when you see the awkward foot movement and the awkward kind of arm angles and just general throwing motion. I just think that's his physical limitations. Like, that's not just him being like, oh my God, I have no idea where to go with it. Hot potato.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not necessarily that. So, yeah, he's just, he's an interesting breed, man. He is a very unique football player. I don't sit here and think he should be on any MVP ballot or anything like crazy like that, but he's just a different dude. And Jim Irsay mentioned it earlier in the week. I'll pub that. Irsay had by far his longest interview since February. We have that up on the website. He was pretty adamant that he could see the Colts running it back. And he mentioned Rivers and Jacoby, 1 and 2. So that's, of course, stuff that we'll get into a little bit for those that want an Andrew Luck update from Irsay. There was a couple of quotes in there. We won't go any longer on that. I will encourage people to check it out, though, because he almost sounds like me trying to explain to my mom and dad why my report card wasn't better, talking about Andrew Luck and whatnot. So, Irsay signed off on this Rivers decision. I always think that's something to keep in mind at quarterback. Irsay's going to have some say in this, but my expectations right now, Phillip Rivers certainly talks like a guy and says that he wants to play another year. And unless something crazy happens, man, I think this gets run back, and Phillip Rivers is probably your starting quarterback Week 1, 2021.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's one thing to remember back. I thought you were going to say he was going to pick something out from like his 3rd year in the league, let alone teams he didn't even play for.
Which, again, like, that stuff would be pretty wild. Like, even memory, your ability to remember a play in week 3 of 2007, like, okay, that's crazy, but, people are weird like that. I mean, I could still recall every golf shot I hit in the 2008 state finals, and it's like, why is that in my brain? Why? Like, get that out of there. But, yeah, I think his intellect is brilliant from a football mind. And Frank mentioned that, when he was signed. Like, Frank's like, I've been around the league a long time. He's top 10 smartest football players that I've ever been around. So I think that helps a whole lot. And again, that article is up on the website.
Perfect. Well, should we jump into Twitter questions, Kevin?
Yes. Yep.
Hey, Kevin, I saw that Reich said that Leonard's injury wasn't serious, but he was wondering if he was banged up before the game on Sunday. He didn't seem to be himself out there. No energy like he normally has, and was slow to get up after making some tackles. Just hoping nothing will be nagging at him going into the playoffs. As always, thanks for the podcast.
And thank you for listening, Curtis. You going back and watching the game now a couple times, I don't think I've ever seen Darius Leonard less hype in a football game. I mean, we're talking like he's crazy. He is he's a hyped individual, and I mean, just slow to get up, just a bit lethargic. It's probably the word that I would use. I mean, compared to normal, like we're used to full on maniac, and he looked, just calm for the most part after those plays. So it was never on the injury report, Curtis. I don't know if he got banged up early in that game, but like I said, we haven't seen the official injury report for Wednesday, but Frank Reich indicated not a big deal. Backs can always be tricky, so we'll see how it plays out. But, having Bobby Okereke back from the first matchup with Houston is obviously huge considering, Watson's ability. I thought Anthony Walker had some rough moments in that first meeting.
Yeah, you're right. There were some tackles where I noticed people would roll off, and he kind of just laid there on his back a little bit longer than normal.
It was just so unmaniac-like.
Yeah. All right, this one's from Daner. Says, great win on Sunday. With the way Phil has come around in the second half of the season, has the off-season draft priority switched yet again? Not to nitpick, but with the speed edge rush still yet to perform, and with the force getting doubled, it could get worse.
Daner, very fair question, but let me make this abundantly clear. The success Phillip Rivers has, or doesn't, should have zero bearing on when you draft the next quarterback. None. Like, that position means way too much, and when you find the guy and you feel like you have the ability to go get the guy, you go freaking do it. I mean, point blank, look at the Packers last year. Right?
Yeah.
They don't care about Aaron Rodgers in the short. No. If we think Jordan Love is the guy, boom, we're going to take Jordan Love, even though it's this crazy wideout draft class and all of this. Obviously, you can point to the Chiefs. They were a pretty good team before Patrick Mahomes got there and still felt the need to go make that move. I mean, look at New England. Jimmy G taken, early second round, I think it was, when Brady was still very much in those prime years as well. So, no, I just – and again, it is a totally fair question, but I just think that it's so difficult to find that person. When you do think you have them, you got to go do it. And it's going to cost a lot, and it's going to look long-term, and it's going to look weird, and it's going to piss some fans off. It's going to piss some people off in your locker room maybe, but you do it. That's how you have to run an NFL franchise. Now, having said that, edge rusher is still very much a need.
Right.
Like, I am not saying that at all. And unfortunately, it's one of the few positions you can point to where Chris Ballard has not evaluated / draft turned into production in the NFL. From Basham to Toure to Banagoo, it just hasn't been there for him.
Yeah. Mac also thought this Sunday's win was a fantastic one, and his question's going to the playoffs. Right now, we're slated as the 6th seed and would play the Buffalo Bills at number 3. How do you think we would match up with them, considering they just beat the Steelers at their place? He says we're not the best cold weather team out there, and I'd be very nervous to play them.
Yeah, cold weather. Interesting. I also feel like this team, I don't know. I know Rivers in cold weather is kind of something that, I don't know, a little bit of concerning. But, if you're starting to run the ball like you're running it, man, I mean, in your defense, I know it's built for kind of indoor turf, but, I mean, they've been great against the run all year. So, I I don't know. I don't think there's no fans at Bills games. At least
There's not.
Yeah, I was going to say. I like the Bills. I think I've mentioned that before. I think Brian Dable's a tremendous offensive mind. I think the Texans should look long and hard at him. I think the Bills have a lot of impact at every level. Maybe they're not just Mahomes, Tyreek Hill but I think they're pretty balanced on both sides of the ball. Stephon Diggs is a really good player. I mean, Tre'Davious White against T.Y. Hilton would be a great matchup. It sounds like they're going to get John Brown back here soon. But at the same time, I look at the standings and I'm like, man, could the Bills go up to 2 and Pittsburgh keep falling? Yeah. That's kind of a fair thing. And I wouldn't have said this a couple of weeks ago, Chris, but would you rather play the Steelers or the Bills right now in the playoffs?
I would rather play the Steelers.
Okay. Yeah, I probably agree with you. Now, part of me is I don't know, playoff success, and I know Big Ben is still 30-whatever-year-old Big Ben and hasn't looked great this season, but I probably agree with you there.
I have a college roommate from Buffalo, and actually during the podcast while we were taping on Monday, he texted me and said, hey, we might play each other this year in the playoffs. And I texted him back, and I said, I don't want to see you in the playoffs. And he jokingly was like, I've never had anyone ever text me that before.
I thought I saw somewhere where they could win the division this weekend, and that'd be the first time, I thought, ever. But those teams with Jim Kelly had to have won the division at some point.
Are they talking about since the crossover of the division? Because
maybe that was it. Maybe since it was 2000, every team in the league has won the division.
Right.
At least once or something like that. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that is a good point.
Yeah, it's been quite a while up in Orchard Park.
And I will say this. I mean, for those of you that I don't know why you would have gone to a Bills home game, but it is an awesome atmosphere. You have?
I have. The opener a couple years ago.
Oh, 2015?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
It wasn't a great game.
No, that was ugly. I love it. I love the stadium. I love the atmosphere. I love the college feel that I get going to that stadium. And, boy, yeah, sexy Rexy.
Yeah, and we'll get to a question later from Brennan in this podcast who's from Toronto. But a lot of the Colts fans that I did meet that week were from Toronto. And I asked, how did you become a Colts fan in Toronto? And they said, we typically get the biggest game of the week, and Peyton Manning was always one of the bigger games, so we just became Colts fans.
That makes sense. And then you wonder, too, AFC East when the Colts were in the AFC East, if that influenced anything as well.
All right, this one's from Robbie. He says, I wonder your thoughts on who we are as a team. They say you are who your record is, but I struggle with our identity. So hot at times and so cold at times. Keep up the great work over there. Hope you and the family and team are well. Thanks,
Robbie. Same to you and everyone out there listening during this holiday season. When I hear, what is a team's identity, part of me is kind of the hot and cold nature is kind of life in the NFL.
Yeah.
This league, more than any other league, is the most, I think, even professional sports league. In 2018, you felt like your identity was a great rushing attack that, was trying to make up for maybe a porous defense. I would say your identity right now, Chris, and again, when I hear identity, I kind of think of the most consistent aspects to your football team. Outstanding pass protection and a playmaking defense.
Yeah.
I mean, yardage-wise, this defense is starting to give up. I think they're 13th in yards per play. So it's kind of getting to that middle, tier-ish, a little bit above middle tier. But it's those turnovers, man. And again, when I thought this defense would be 10 to 12 at the start of the year, the yardage is about what I thought it would be. But I never guessed they would be third in the league in takeaways. I mean, that is what is separating them or, putting them in this position to where when the offense maybe hasn't finished drives off as well as you would like for them to, the defense has either made points or simply taken points off the board. So, yeah, I would say identity-wise right now, I mean, holy shnikes, it has been a playmaking defense.
Yeah.
It has been a turnover machine on that side of the ball. And then offensively, it's great pass protection, and maybe new identities are being created with a run game starting to trend upwards.
Yeah.
A T.Y. Hilton starting to look like a Pro Bowler. But I can't say that's identity because the other thing that I just think is it's great for your record, but it's not great for your evaluation is, and this is mainly with the Colts offense. The Colts offense has played a very weak defensive schedule. The schedule, I think right now ranks 27th in the league or something like that, 28th in the league. The defense is even worse than that. Like opposing defenses who they've played. I think it's one top 12 defense all year long, which is just kind of crazy when you think there's 16 games on his schedule.
Right.
How do you not fall into 3 or 4 of those teams ranking up there? So I think that's difficult to, again, evaluate just this offense.
And, Kevin, there's pros and cons to every stat or every analytic you look at, but not just the takeaways on the defense. Look at the timeliness of those takeaways.
Great point. Yeah, I mean, huge. We can't talk about the Kenny Moore pick enough. Yeah, I was talking to somebody today, and like he was mentioning to me, like, without Kenny Moore the last 2 weeks, you might be a 7-6 football team.
Mm-hmm.
The pick he had against Brandon Cooks, the plays he made at the end of the first half against Houston.
Right.
I mean, a couple pass deflections in the end zone. They got to settle for 3 there. I mean, that's the difference in them, just kneeling the ball out there at the end and kicking a field goal versus, you escaping with the, as Jim Irsay said, Diego Maradona, the hand of God. Yeah, you got to love Irsay there. But yeah, timeliness for sure. No, that's such a good point.
All right, Andrew and Craig both want to talk about the quarterback room. They want to know, how much do you think keeping continuity at the quarterback spot will influence whether or not Phil is re-signed? There have been 3 different quarterbacks in 3 years. Don't really love the idea of having 4 and 4.
Yeah, Craig, it's an interesting question. My initial thought is not too much. But because I think you have to look at it like this. If you're going to move on from Phillip Rivers and like trade for Carson Wentz, or you're going to commit to a rookie quarterback starting from day one, which, again, you would have to do that a month and a half after free agency is over, which the draft is so unpredictable. You are also committing to that guy being your guy for 5-10 years. So you are saying, yes, 4 different quarterbacks in 4 years, but hopefully 4 different quarterbacks in 14 years with this new, and Wentz would fall into that category. I mean, he would be your guy for seemingly 5 to 10 years if everything goes the same way. So it's, it's funny. People ask me all the time, okay, who do you think the Colts are interested in draft-wise? I'll try to get more into that in the offseason, but if the Colts are doing their job right, I will know nothing, and we will know nothing. Just like no one believed the Chiefs would trade up, or even the Texans would trade up and take Watson. I feel like there is some legit homework and interest being done on guys like Justin Fields and Trey Lance specifically. I think there are other guys, certainly, that might be more in their range without having to give up a whole lot that they would also be doing homework on and are doing homework on. But, yeah, I'm not part of me watching that game a couple weeks ago, I'm watching Ed Dodds, Frank Wright, or Chris Ballard's right-hand man. He's on the sidelines during games. I'm like, man, you watch Deshaun Watson up close on the sideline. That's got to influence some decision-making.
I'm sure it does.
Down the road. And hell, if he had interest from the Texans from a GM standpoint, you would think that would interest him. But I also think with Frank and the Wentz thing, think back to Frank and the quarterback situation this March. It was either Rivers or it was Foles. Mm-hmm. 2 familiar guys that he feels like he could resurrect, fix, whatever you want to call it. Frank thinks he can fix a lot. Jacoby, top 20 quarterback. Like, he rightfully so, I think, believes a lot in himself. Now, the Jacoby thing didn't necessarily work out. Obviously, Rivers is working out. But, he's like the girl in high school. It's like, oh, the bad boy that's been suspended 3 times and, it does this and does that. Oh, I can fix him. Mm-hmm. He can be the long-term, he can be, I can take on his last name at some point. Frank's got a little bit in a polar opposite way. I can never see Frank Reich ever being a bad boy. But Frank's got a little bit of that of, I like who I like, and I believe. He really believes in people, which is dangerous to a degree, but it's also strong conviction to where so much of his philosophy comes from. So I think that plays into the Wentz thing as well.
That's the pastor in him, Kevin. He sees the good in everybody.
Yeah, that is a great point.
Kevin, Steven wants to know about Jacoby Brissett, just getting back to the quarterback play. And the Colts running the ball 100% of the times when he's on the field, he feels like it's too predictable. Will we eventually see any play-action plays from Brissett?
Yeah, I think we will. I'm a little bit surprised we haven't seen more of a pass wrinkle to it. Brissett pass run check, I think, is something you got to think about. Mm-hmm. Have there been times where it's straight up pass play, or does he have options at the line? I choose to think he does. A couple things I want to see down the stretch here, Chris. That I think is a wrinkle to throw in the short yardage, and this is something that it's hard to really script it, but I think it'd be very beneficial for Hot Rod to make a field goal past 45 yards.
Yeah.
Like, what happens when you have 4th and 8 at the 32-yard line in a meaningful game? Like, people are so like, well, the Colts, go for on 4th down. They really don't go for it unless it's short yardage. Like, it's not just like, I don't have a punter. I'm just going for it religiously.
Right.
Like, it's not that extensive. So I feel like that is just kind of another. Again, it's not like you're going to force that field goal, but I think it'd be beneficial. He's only had one attempt past 44, and that was the chunk that he had. So I think that's something that would be good for his his confidence, his psyche, maybe Frank Reich's psyche as well, going into the playoffs.
These questions are from John and Logan. Hey, Kevin, with the game from Taylor, do you see Mac's likelihood of coming back dwindling? Also, I know we want a backup left tackle, but I do feel a dominant edge rusher pushes this team's ceiling higher. What are your thoughts?
Okay, let's start with the first one here. You said John and Logan?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't think Mac's likelihood of coming back is dwindling because of Jonathan Taylor. Multiple backs, is such a huge emphasis of Frank Reich. And I think you want to keep Hines kind of in that specific role. So, and you aren't breaking the bank either with Marlon Mack. This is a good question. Dominant edge rusher or a backup left tackle, which pushes the ceiling higher? I mean, obviously, the pass rusher pushes the ceiling higher if everyone's healthy and if Anthony Costanzo is not retired.
Right.
As soon as that happens, Braden Smith goes down, Anthony Costanzo goes down, all of a sudden, having a capable left tackle or right tackle can push your ceiling extremely high compared to what it would be, without that guy. Like, think about it. The Colts have literally benched LaRaven Clark and Chaz Green very quickly in games this season. Like, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of confidence in your backup tackle depth.
Yeah. How
quickly those guys got benched. And obviously the whole Nelson at left tackle of the future, we can get into that a little bit later. But I don't disagree on a level playing field, if everyone's healthy, certainly the edge rusher gives you a higher ceiling, but you're also just kind of one injury away from here you go at tackle and musical chairs and Quenton Nelson time.
Yeah, so let's stay there at left tackle with this question from Brian. He says, the few plays Costanzo went out with the injury and they moved Nelson to guard, how come it was Joey Hunt over Pinter at left guard?
Yeah, it's a good question, Brian. I don't know this specifically, but I'll tell you, I guess, what a little bit that I know. I can't recall Danny Pinter, and shout out to Ball State, big one Friday night for the Chirpers.
Mm-hmm.
They are in Detroit. They are trying to win their first MAC title since forever or a long time, I think it's been.
I'd have to look. It's been a while.
Yeah.
I know the Nate Davis team did not capitalize there.
Right. I remember the Nate Davis teams winning in Bloomington, but not necessarily in Detroit. So good luck to the Cardinals, the Fighting Colleen Bowens, the pride of Muncie. With that. Okay, Danny Pinter, the Ball State product. I can't recall him ever, I shouldn't say ever, but being at left guard very often during camp. Right guard and center, yes, but much, much more at those two spots than left guard. I don't know if that plays into it. I don't know if this is kind of a weak thing where it's like, all right, Ryan Kelly's still a little banged up. Danny takes some snaps at center, takes some snaps at, right guard, and in an emergency, that was a break the case sort of situation. Like, that was two things had to happen for Nelson to get moved over there. Costanzo had to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Chaz Green had to suck. Like, I mean, those are two significant things that had to have happened for you to go there. And I kind of like Joey Hunt, hair flying around. And
yeah.
Now, I do think Hunt, you've used up practice squad call-ups on him. So just seeing how this O-line depth plays out will be interesting.
Yuri says that Doyle rules and wants to talk some tight ends. With Jack being back from the injury, we've seen more doubles and triple tight end sets. How crucial has this been to the success in the play calling and the run game recently?
Yeah, boy, did you see the Jack Doyle beard?
Every year. Look, I kind of look like him.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
His is bushier than mine.
Yeah, I was going to say, and yours is thick right now, but his is, thick. I mean, we're talking.
Sure, his wife loves it.
Yeah, I can imagine. That Steelers defensive lineman, what's his name? Was it Brett Kern? Or no. You know who I'm talking about.
I do know who you're talking about. He's like a big hunter and outdoorsman. Yeah.
I mean, he had a beard down to his freaking sternum. I'd say tight end, the multiple tight end sets have helped. I don't know if it's like incredibly helped, but I think it helps you kind of manage personnel. It kind of dictates a little bit more of your ability to keep certain personnel groupings on the field for a defense. We really haven't seen the tight end group explode in the pass game. Burton's been pretty quiet as of late. Yeah.
All right, Kev, we are going to head north of the border, like I said, to our friend in Toronto, Brennan, who will kick things off in regards to questions kind of looking into the future of the Colts. He says, given the lack of constant pass rush this season, would you prioritize an edge rusher or future left tackle in the upcoming draft/free agency if you were Chris Ballard?
Can I say both?
Sure.
It's interesting. If you think Nelson can be there permanently, maybe it is edge rusher. Which, it's just so crazy to think that we're talking about Quenton Nelson as, potentially the guy at left tackle. I was looking up a little bit more of like Nelson's draft profile, and his arm length is kind of like 50% for O linemen. Costanzo's like upper 70s.
Yeah.
Braden Smith has super, super short arms, which is interesting, to think that he's been so successful there at tackle. But obviously that's a big thing. A big thing that, people use to evaluate offensive linemen. Because this is 2020 in the media cycle. Mrs. Nelson, Quentin's mother, retweeted my tweet earlier today about Quenton looking good at left tackle.
Wow.
So, infer that what you will, run with that what you will. But yeah, in all seriousness, I think that is something that all of a sudden is kind of on the radar a little bit. Now, I want to see Nelson a lot longer at that spot. Well, you don't want to see him a lot longer at that spot because that means Costanzo's hurt. But you do selfishly from a valuation standpoint there. What would I prioritize? I probably do edge rusher. But, man, I think I'm a lot closer to having left tackle right there than most people are.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people saw Nelson on Sunday and they're like, that is the future at left tackle. And which, okay, it might work out, but then it's like, do you start getting a little bit nitpicky where it's like, now you're Hall of Fame guard. What if he's just like a top 10 offensive tackle? Yeah. And now the left guard that comes in there is Danny Pinter, and he's just an average guard. And so how does that hurt your offensive line? Like, I think Nelson as a puller is so effective at left guard. Does a tackle pull as much, in the run game? Just things like that. So, but, when you talk about edge rusher, man, it's just that Kamoko Toure projection is so difficult. Something that we're going to do a Pacers pod here later in the week, and I'm sorry it's taken so long, but we will get that out as a season preview. And we'll talk a little bit about Goga Batadze and just like his development is so key to making future decisions for the franchise, mainly Turner Sabonis.
Right.
Kamoko Toure's development is so critical to making future decisions, and it's why Justin Houston coming back looks a whole lot likelier because you just haven't seen enough. Yeah. And Toure and how he looks could impact the draft. And now you're looking at like, oh my gosh, the whole Montez Sweat trade, trading that pick, and he continues to produce at a really high level. So, Brandon, it's a great question, and kudos to you for listening from Toronto.
Kevin Steven wants to know, what are the odds the Colts win the division, and how important is it for us to have the first place spot? Says, I think if we're first in the division, we'll have a real shot at making a Super Bowl run. Do you think we can possibly win out and the Titans drop their game in 2 weeks to the Packers? Appreciate all you do. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Steven. What our guy Drew said, plus 135 on Monday?
Yes, correct.
To win the division. I think first place is key. You know, I know road teams are having great success this season in the NFL, comparatively speaking, and obviously the lack of fans, I think, plays into that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, when you get in that 4-5 matchup, that means you're going to get the Chiefs in all likelihood off the bye. So I guess for those getting super greedy, you know, do you think about, boy, is a 6 seed better off? Like, than you would Buffalo, Pittsburgh would probably be the route before you got to Kansas City. That's something to keep in mind. You know, I would probably rather have the Colts schedule, I think I'd rather have the Colts schedule right now than the Titans schedule. Some people might disagree with that because Watson, you know, flash in the pan, could do something crazy, but I'd rather play Pittsburgh than play Green Bay, who's still going for a bye.
Correct.
And then a 1 overall seed in the NFC. And Stafford looks like he's hurt. So,
True.
Who knows if he plays or not? We'll see how that plays out. But, yeah, I'd probably put it at, I don't know, 40%, 35% the Colts win the division. Just because I think Tennessee could very well go 2-1. And, you know, I don't know. It's hard for me to commit to a Colts win in Pittsburgh. And, like, the Colts literally, they just have no margin for error. I mean, the tiebreakers, and even when you get deeper into the tiebreakers, I don't think it's going to look like if these two teams are lined up record-wise at the end of the year. I can't see the Colts winning a tiebreaker. It just doesn't look very favorable in those situations. But, yeah, having said that, 35, 40%.
Good for you, Kevin. That's pretty spot on because I believe as of yesterday, the Colts are 40%. They have a 40% chance to win the division.
Really? Oh,
yep.
Gosh. Wow.
There you go.
I'll take it.
You know what you're doing, man. All right, from Brooks and Sterling, 1, do you think Julian Blackmon is still Defensive Player of the Year? He's kind of been quiet the last 2 weeks. 2, do you think Pittman can be the future number 1 wideout considering he still hasn't shown much down the field, or does that just have to do with the system that we run?
Yeah, to the first one, it's probably going to be Chase Young. You know, I feel like he started to, you know, produce at a higher level. And again, with those awards, preseason hype, a.k.a. look at the college football rankings, have a whole lot to do with who wins them. And Jeremy Chin, the guy that I mentioned a couple weeks ago, the Fisher's product, you know, he's produced really well. And, you know, Blackmon, recency bias is so key. It's why, and I tweeted this out this morning when Kenny Moore won AFC Defensive Player of the Week. Great, and he probably needs it to help out his Pro Bowl and All-Pro candidacy, but that doesn't mean, like, it sucks that it takes that to really put you on the radar of people. Blackmon had that in November. He needs another one really quickly, I think, to kind of get on that list. You know, the whole Pittman thing, I mean, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't recall one, like, true vertical shot to Pittman or one true, like, 50-50, that guy 6'4", 220, he'll just kind of pluck it right over the DB and haul that in for a catch target.
I don't either. When I think Pittman this year, just going through the quick Rolodex in my brain, I think crossing routes and sweep runs.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the primary, certainly. That's primarily been what he...
And false starts.
Has done, yeah, and those as well. And kind of just, like, settling into zones a little bit. I think they've thrown a couple slants to him. He could have had a touchdown on that ball that got batted down, it looked like, early on in that game. But I still think he can get there. But, yeah, I mean, those are a couple route tree items that I'd like to see develop. And I say that in full realization this is his rookie season.
And you never know. Like we said in the last podcast, we're slowly starting to see wrinkle after wrinkle. So, obviously, those plays are in the playbook. We just haven't seen them yet.
Right.
All right, from Jordy, someone asked a good question about Nelson becoming the left tackle after Costanzo retires. However, what about the immediate future? Let's say, God forbid, Costanzo tears his ACL next week. Are you writing Chaz Green?
Just stop. Cancel Christmas.
Or will Nelson finish at left tackle with Pinter or Hunt at guard?
Boy, I think it's got to be Nelson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's got to be Nelson. I've gone back and watched that series. He got beat kind of on the first snap, but I thought that duo handled stunts well. And, unfortunately, the Raiders, again, aren't a great evaluation from their defensive line group. You would like to see Nelson a little bit more like truly in space, just because that is something that, is a lot different, pass protecting at left guard than it is left tackle. But, Chris, I think this is such a fascinating storyline to debate because, Nelson is going to get, in all likelihood, probably the highest contract in NFL history for an offensive lineman, I would assume, even though he plays guard. So if that money is in a left tackle, okay, that makes a little more sense. Now, the other bird on the other shoulder will say, well, interior pressure means so much. In today's NFL, you see these three techniques. You see the DeForest Buckners of the world. You need to be stout at guard as well. And, certainly I can hear that as well. But, I mean, in a perfect world, maybe not the most perfect world, but the most realistic perfect world, Costanza retires after 2021.
Yes.
Nelson slides over. He's being paid this absurd amount of money now, but he is your left tackle of the future. And then Penter, who on the surface doesn't have an obvious starting job. Like, they feel like center is maybe his best spot, but Ryan Kelly's going nowhere.
Right.
And Glowinski, I think, is signed for 2 more seasons. So I guess Glow, his contract might be up, but whatever.
Right.
You re-sign him at the age of 31 or 32, or you go find another guard, something like that. Now, all of a sudden, you've got, Nelson, Penter, Kelly, Glowinski or some other right guard, and Braden Smith, a right tackle. Like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And also, you are not exhausting really any significant resource to change up your O-line. You're just moving over that insane contract to left tackle. Now, fully knowing, well, you still need to find a backup tackle, period. So it's a thought. I would it's not something I'd push all my chips in on. I would still want to, again, evaluate Nelson more at tackle, / if the right opportunity presented itself in the draft, I wouldn't say no to a tackle because, again, if you can get, Jedrick Wills at left tackle and boom, there's your guy, on a rookie contract playing a very important position and giving you good football, and I still have got the Hall of Famer guard, sign me up.
Totally agree. All right, 1924, with consistent injuries to Leonard and Okereke, says, I feel like the Colts have to either re-sign Walker or draft another linebacker this offseason. Am I being paranoid, or is there some validity to this?
Sorry, someone from the Colts just texted me. I want to make sure that I reply to this.
Good.
All right, what's the
Okereke and Leonard, with their injuries, do we have to re-sign Walker, or do we need to go pick someone up?
Yeah,
at linebacker. This
another thing, it's I look at EJ Speed, and it's kind of the case study of like how many. I can't recall him playing one snap on defense this year.
Yeah,
maybe he has, but I can't remember it. And he played a little bit, I think, against the Raiders his rookie year, but that was it. So. If you can project him to a bigger role, then, you don't necessarily need Walker. I would probably rather have Walker. Now, Chris Ballard, I think, has done a really good job identifying the traits they need in a linebacker, and they've drafted all of those linebackers. So, can you let Walker walk and then draft the next Anthony Walker in the 5th round? Sure. That makes a whole lot of sense to me as well. So, I am probably a little bit more pro re-sign Walker. But I fully understand reasons why you wouldn't / you can upgrade potentially on a cheaper contract. I like the cerebral nature that he brings to that position. And we have seen Leonard and Okereke at times, miss some games. So I think that is something that you have to keep in mind.
Kevin, White feels like the Colts coaching staff seems to have done an admirable job of developing the draftees and young players in general, and are reaping the benefits on the field, seeing Pittman, Taylor, Blackman, Rogers, Penter, and Glasgow all showing improvements to their games is a testament to the, quote, teachers, unquote, on the staff. Taylor and Blackman are particularly shining stars. Is it not a fair conclusion, then, to expect that Jacob Eason could be quietly improving at a similar pace, but without the benefit of playing behind two veteran and pricey quarterbacks. I think you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, Wyatt, I do, and I think it's a understandable question, but I just think quarterback is a totally different animal, Chris. I don't think you can say you've developed, offensive linemen well, you've developed, a young safety well, the linebackers well. That means you're going to develop a quarterback well. We've seen teams totally get the quarterback position right and not get anything else right, a la Houston. You've seen teams get a whole lot of stuff right elsewhere, Chicago, but never get the quarterback right. So I just think it's a totally different animal, and you guys know full well, Eason needs reps. Well, I've talked about that endlessly. This is not a, Jacob Eason did not walk in the NFL with, Jake Fromm starting experience or Ian Book starting experience. I mean, he really did not start that long in his collegiate career. So I can't go there, Wyatt, of just, you've drafted well and you've gotten early impact from a lot of positions. Quarterback, totally different.
This one is from Trepp. If the Colts are able to keep trending in an uphill manner as the offense keeps getting better and the defense playing full games, do you think that they would be a team to look out for during the playoffs? Trepp is from Hawaii, and every time you ask for questions, he says he's asleep. Love the pod. Been loving your content since the days you worked with the Colts.
I love that, Trepp. Thank you. If you keep trending like this, what something I like about T.Y. Hilton right now, Chris, is the variety and the catches that he's making. This is not just, again, 4 for 85 yards. He hit on 2 deep balls. No, this is a very different route tree. Jonathan Taylor, like I said earlier, he looks a little bit like Marlon Mack at the end of 2018. Now, as I said earlier in the week, I'm worried about the pass rush. And, if you lose – now, one thing to keep in mind, if you lose the defensive playmaking, can you counter that with maybe just capping a few more of these drives? That can kind of – can you make up for some of the scoring there? But as I said earlier, we have to acknowledge it. This is one of the easier schedules in the NFL, particularly of who your offense has played. And, it's not – they aren't awful numbers. They're not. But Phillip Rivers has been a pretty average quarterback in the playoffs. Is that real? Is that something that gets thrown out the window a bit without the atmospheres like you're going to have in these playoff venues here in 2021, I guess? Those are all things I think to keep in mind.
All right, Belopa wants to know if we reach the AFC playoffs, Indy would indicate being close. This is the dilemma, going in the first round of the draft by a dominant pass rusher, the missing piece, to win now or go for the quarterback of the future.
This is kind of similar to, and thank you, Belopa, for the question. This is kind of similar to this is our guy from Costa Rica, I believe, chiming in here. This is kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier about the Packers, reference of how they decided to go about things in the 2020 draft. I also think, Chris, there's a fine line in, when you keep going Band-Aid, do you then lose some of the prime core that you currently have? Buckner in his prime, Leonard in his prime, Nelson, Smith. I know I'm missing guys. Kenny Moore. If you go Band-Aid for, the next handful of years, and you're trying to get by, now all of a sudden that group is, at the age of 30, and you draft the rookie quarterback, and maybe they don't have the same sort of foundation to kind of grow with. I still think a young QB can grow with this current core that I think is very foundationally sturdy for the Colts. And we have seen, again, Wilson, a Super Bowl on a rookie contract, Mahomes, Wentz and Goff, pretty much got their teams to those Super Bowls. Obviously, Foles took over for Wentz, but that team was damn good before Foles got in there. So those come to mind of just making sure that there's still a lot of support there. So I don't think, and I don't know, I can't see Chris Ballard just having this huge win now, focus. I think if the quarterback is there, he would make that move.
All right, Kevin, we're going to go from the beauty of Costa Rica up to the evil empire that is New England.
Always gloomy up there.
Yes, this is from Gregory, who is a Colts fan and has loved watching the Patriots fans panic all year long. Wants to know, what's up with Campbell? Anything official? Is he done for the year? Happy holidays to you and the family.
Yeah, same to you, Gregory. Again, I have been told that he is very, very unlikely to return. Nothing official, which you don't need to do anything official. But yeah, that's what I've been told.
Jabroni also wishes your family a safe and happy holidays. Do you think DeForest Buckner is this year's team MVP?
Jabroni, thank you. And same to you and yours as well. Cole, I'm going to go Cole MVP. Him and Rivers.
Okay.
I just think quarterback means that much. And honestly, Buckner means a whole lot to that defense, as we've seen. But I would say with the definition as is, most valuable player, not best, most valuable player, Cole MVP, that can kind of be a cop-out, Am I my wife Maddie coaching the 4th grade volleyball team and everyone's got to get an award?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going there. I think Cole MVP in this situation is pretty deserved.
Yeah. All right, I don't believe this is the Beans from Even Stevens, but we do have a question from Beans. What is more likely, the Colts move on from Brissett or Brissett moves on from the Colts?
Brissett moves on from the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think we go back to the Irsay comment, Chris, about he could see this running it back with these two. So, yeah, I think it's Jacoby Brissett saying, I entered the NFL as a 3rd-round pick. I want to be a starter. And New England never granted him that opportunity on a long-term basis, and Indianapolis really never granted him it either. I think, some might argue he showed that he wasn't a starter. But, yeah, I'd say Brissett moving on.
All right, a few more here. This one's an early Christmas present from Sonia, whose brother doesn't have Twitter, but she's going to ask a Twitter question on his behalf because he forced her to ask this question. If the Bengals end up with the number 2 pick in the draft,
could we just stop? That might be the greatest tweet that we've had. This is family, folks. We are a family. That is unity. That is love. That is brother, sister. Sonia, thank you. Can you imagine her reaction to him? No, I'm not sending some
what do you
stupid
mean?
tweet.
Yeah, who is? I don't even know who this guy is.
Yeah,
it's someone I listen to. Just do it.
K Bowen, BOWAN. What is it again? 107. What?
I love it. 'Tis the season. If the Bengals end up with the number 2 draft pick, what are the chances Ballard trades up big time for potential to get Fields? If yes, what would he have to give up? Bengals clearly don't need a quarterback, so they may be open to trading back.
When you get to mid-December, Chris, you always have rooting interest. If you're going to compete to be a playoff team or, compete to move up in the draft. And, for the Colts, I think they've got multiple rooting interests. Obviously, the playoffs speak for themselves, but you want the Bengals to keep on losing. You want the Chargers to keep on losing. You want the Jets to somehow believe Sam Darnold is still the guy and keep on losing, which would just be ludicrous. The Cowboys to pay Dak Prescott. You want the Texans to keep on losing because that's the Dolphins' pick, and they've got Tua. So you want all that to happen. Right. Maybe the Falcons still believe Matt Ryan's got, I don't know how many more years left in him. Now, trading up to 2 would just be an absurd amount of picks. I would say if you're coming from the 20s, it would take your own first, a future first, probably your own second, and I would say next year's 3rd or 4th. Mm-hmm. Maybe next year's 3rd and 4th. I mean, it would be a juicy pass. I mean, you get into the top 5. I mean, think back to how much the Colts got from going from 3 to 6.
Yeah. Right.
The Jets trade up 3 spots and gave you 2 second-rounders?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So, you imagine trading up from 26 to 3 or something like that?
Yeah. Kevin Eric wants to know, do you think the Titans will go 2-1 for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I do. That was a big win the Titans got last weekend because it was another divisional win.
Yeah.
Which helps them in that divisional, that tiebreaker as well.
Mm-hmm.
That was the one that, if you had to pick, lose the Jags or the Packers. Jags. But there's a reason why the Jags are the Jags and the Packers are the Packers.
Yes. Well, 2 things that Indianapolis knows well, Colts football and racing. This one comes from Josh, who loves the podcast and would often come to Indy to race sprint cars. He's a fan from New Mexico.
That's awesome.
Says it's tough to find in-depth Colt coverage on a national level, so he appreciates the pod. And his question is, outside of Rivers and Buckner, what injury would most devastate the team's chances in January? Every time Rhodes appears to be injured, I panic for what that might mean in the pass coverage. I could see the O-line injuries being the answer as well. What are your thoughts?
So outside of Buckner and Rivers?
Yes.
So first off, Josh, thanks for listening. I want to go to New Mexico. I want to see the pit where the Lobos play. That's what I want to do.
Would be awesome.
Yeah. Costanzo. Yeah. Rhodes. I probably Costanzo, Rhodes, Hilton? Costanzo, Hilton, Rhodes? I mean, I'm very high on what T.Y. Hilton means to this football team. You guys heard me say that even earlier this year when he was out and he wasn't really producing a whole lot. I'm pretty sure the Colts lost that game. So, yeah, Costanzo would still be one. But, yeah, every time Rhodes goes down, I think I said this earlier, he's like the Lance Stevenson. How many times would Lance go down and then be like, once the crowd gets loud enough, I'll get up. Yeah. I feel like that was Lance, play my music before I get up. So, yeah, that's a good question, though. I'd say Costanzo, Hilton, Rhodes would be my order.
Yeah, I think based on the gasp and those kind of thoughts from the Colts faithful, Rhodes will more than likely be back here next year.
Yeah, that is a good point. That is just a tremendous signing by Chris Ballard. Mm-hmm. One I was a bit skeptical of and curious of and thought there should be more competition at corner, which I guess is a different debate, but kicking the tires on first-round picks.
Yep.
Always do it.
All right, the last one for this week's podcast is from Matt. Says, hey, KB, appreciate the content as always. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you, Matt. You as well.
With 3 weeks left, are you ready to give Executive of the Year to Ballard again with the drafting and signees respectively of Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, Blackman, Rivers, Buckner, Rhodes, Carey, etc.? It seems like he's a lock with the other top teams like the Chiefs and the Packers largely staying the same.
Yeah, Matt. I'll be honest. I've always kind of been confused about Executive of the Year. Is it like straight up like what you just did in the previous offseason, or how much of it is like this is the roster you've built over time and now they're like starting to win?
Right.
But I think he's very much in that conversation. I mean, the Browns, I thought, had some nice offseason moves. I don't know, the Bills maybe. But when you lay it out like that, I mean, certainly Rivers, and Buckner, just those two alone, that's not to mention, like you said, what Rhodes has given you. So, yeah, I can't say I think about Executive of the Year a whole lot or, like, look at many big lists with it, but you got to think if the Colts win the division, he'd be in the conversation. Now, I think if they don't win the division, it probably will go to someone else. Mm-hmm. Now, that person might not have the same amount of moves that, like, Chris has had, but, again, it might be over time. Like, oh, here are the Steelers. Let's give it to them because they've drafted receivers well for 37 straight years, and their defense is, largely a homegrown talent plus trading for Minkah Fitzpatrick. I know, again, that didn't happen this year, but, how much of that is just overtime stuff. I did want to sneak in this one from Sam.
Okay.
He mentioned that he was listening to Monday's pod, and when I answered the 5 Colts I would want to keep for the next 5 years, he was shocked I didn't mention Kenny Moore. Mm-hmm. Figured he'd be a lock. Full transparency, Sam, I just forgot. I forgot about Kenny Moore. I don't know. Maybe I talked about him so much, Chris, that it just went out of my brain there for a second. And I looked back on that list. I had Nelson, Leonard, Buckner, Pittman, Braden Smith. Love Kenny Moore. Love him. Who am I taking off? People probably say Pittman. Now, I just think having a potentially a number one wideout means a little bit more.
Yeah.
And especially when I'm thinking I don't have quarterback. So I need to really make sure that I have that stud wideout potentially, obviously, to help out that young quarterback. But yeah, again, Sam, I just totally forgot about Kenny Moore. I would say that he should probably be on that list. And I mean, somebody could make the argument. Somebody might say, I don't know, take off Leonard. They'd rather have Kenny Moore than Leonard. Okay. That's a debate we could have. So yeah, I just want to make sure that I snuck that in.
Yeah, and I agree with you there because Sam's a loyal listener. He actually DM'd me on Twitter as well and said the same thing.
Oh, he was pissed then.
And I was like, no, I was just like, Sam, there's times, I'm looking towards the next question of what's going to be asked on the pod. I'm trying to stir the pot by jokingly tell Kevin Jacob Eason just to get the YouTube comments up in arms. Like when you have to mention 5 quickly off the top of your head, it's difficult, and that is a testament to Chris Ballard again. So there's your Executive of the Year.
Yeah, no, that is another good point. So thank you, Sam, for mentioning that. I wanted to slide that in.
All right, Kevin, 3 keys, something that we always do before every Colts game as they take on the Texans this Sunday at 1 o'clock at Lucas Oil Stadium. What are the 3 keys to pulling out this divisional win? Yeah,
limit the magic, my number 1 key. I think Deshaun Watson can create some of that. The skill guys for the Texans stink, but Deshaun Watson, he does not stink. When you look back at that first meeting, Chris, I've gone back and watched the first matchup. I mean, the first 17 points the Texans scored, they all were because of Deshaun Watson's legs. All of them. Like, if you just got him to the ground on a couple of those third downs or the ball's incomplete, you've built a multi-score league. Like, Deshaun Watson and J.J. Watt can influence the game in a huge way.
Mm-hmm.
That's it on that whole entire Texans team. So limit the magic. Key number 2, tap into Hilton. This is same as it was 2 weeks ago. Yes, the production that Hilton has given you is incredible here as of late, so you love that. But, again, guys can play off that. The attention has got to start to grow, especially against Houston, to where the Pittmans and the Burtons and the Allie Coxes and the Pascals of the world can make some plays. And the run game might have a few less guys in the box as well. Now, home games, T.Y. Hilton against the Texans hasn't been as insane as the road game, T.Y. Hilton. But still, I mean, he is their daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, ride Jonathan Taylor. I go back and watch Sunday's meeting with the Raiders. The 2 plays that really stood out to me about Taylor, Chris, it wasn't the 62-yarder. Like, yes, 4-3 is in the open field. We know that. It was the blitz pickup to get the 20-yarder to Michael Pittman, something he did not have to do a whole lot at Wisconsin. Incredible play there. And then the second play of the game, it's a tackle for loss. I mean, it is right. I think it's Farrell. That was when Costanzo was hurt. Like, Cleveland Farrell is right there. Sidestep, 10 or 12-yard gain.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those are plays where I'm just like, whoa. Taylor had 1 carry in that 40-minute stretch in the first matchup. That will not happen on Sunday. I can assure you of that. So you need to ride him. He got going in the fourth quarter of that first meeting, but did not. And the Brandon Dunn injury, their D tackle, I think will help out. So I got the Colts covering. 30-20 is my pick. What do you got?
I'm going to go 31-13.
Ooh, so you got even more of a route.
It probably won't be that wide of a margin. I'm hoping the Texans are cashing it in. I hope we can get that offensive pressure like you said. I'm sure you saw when you went back and rewatched that game from a couple weeks ago, the staggering statistic on when Watson gets sacked 3 times or more in a game, what his win and loss record is versus less than that. So really want to see a lot up front from the Colts. And like you said, with the magic that guy presents, it's going to be challenging, but hopefully the Texans are cashing it in for the season.
Lastly, I didn't realize this. Frank Reich has only swept 1 South opponent in his time here in Indianapolis. Now, that's difficult, but you would think that it was something that they would have done a little bit more, but that's just kind of how the division is played out, and part of why you haven't won a division. So you can do that on Sunday. Obviously, won't do it against Jacksonville in Week 17, but the ability to do that would go a long way in helping this team get into the postseason. All right, he's Chris Presley. Everybody, Beers with Bowen tentatively for early January. We'll see how the playoff picture shakes out, but if the Colts make it, we will have a Beers with Bowen. Again, probably in that first week there, that January 7th, 8th-ish is kind of what we're targeting there for a Beers with Bowen. And for those that haven't, please subscribe to our YouTube page, 107.5 The Fan on YouTube, where every podcast is posted.
Yeah, appreciate that. And to the 10,000 people that will be at Lucas Oil Stadium this weekend, I know we had a drop in attendance. Get loud. It's a big game. Need you on your feet.
Huge one on Sunday at 1 o'clock at Lucas Oil Stadium. We'll be back Monday with another edition of Kevin's Corner. Colts-wise, we'll be back with a Pacers one later in the week. He's Chris Presley. I'm Kevin Bowen. See ya.